on this Friday night, putting the brakes on spring break. Airlines ground flights to popular sun destinations.
Now is just not the time to be flying.
And if you do leave the country, there's a price to pay. Glimmers of hope in the vaccine world. The promising results from 2 more candidates. But Canada's COVID vaccine rollout hits yet another snag. Plus, a devastating fire in Toronto.
This is one of the worst tragedies by fire I've seen in my career.
The chaotic scene and the lives lost. And an ambitious climate plan goes into top gear.
It's a watershed moment because it indicates just how quickly things are accelerating.
The move by General Motors and the drive for other automakers to follow in this carbon footprint.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. Cooped up Canadians in desperate need of a March break abroad are being warned to make other plans. The federal government is tightening travel measures to help slow the spread of COVID-19 and its highly infectious variants. Canada's main airlines are suspending service to popular sun destinations effective Sunday until April 30th. Starting February 3rd, international flights can only land in Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, and Montreal. And in the coming weeks, there will be a mandatory COVID test at the airport for people returning to Canada. That's in addition to the test required before the flight.
We know that just one case of the variant that comes in could cause significant challenges, and that's why we need to take extra measures. Yes, it is extremely low, the percentage of cases that are traced back to international travel, but it's not zero.
There are still major questions about how the changes will roll out. But as David Akin reports, what is clear is the hefty price you'll pay if you insist on packing your bags.
It is the federal government's strongest action yet to deter non-essential international travel.
With the challenges we currently face with COVID-19, both here at home and abroad, we all agree that now is just not the time to be flying.
To start, flights bound for any destination in the Caribbean or Mexico are canceled, effective Sunday. And if you think Florida or California is your next option for sun, well, consider this. The Biden administration will soon enact mandatory 14-day quarantines for anyone arriving in the U.S. on non-essential travel. Air travelers to Canada are already required to have a COVID-19 test before getting on the plane. Within a few weeks, they'll also have to take a PCR COVID-19 test as soon as they get off the plane in Canada.
Travelers will then have to wait for up to 3 days at an approved hotel for their test results at their own expense, which is expected to be more than $2,000.
Travelers with a negative test and a government-approved quarantine plan can head home, but will be subject to enhanced monitoring and surveillance while they quarantine for 14 days. Travelers with a positive test, or those without a quarantine plan, will do their 2-week quarantine in a secure federal government facility.
So the basic foundation of our public health measures is the 14-day quarantine.
No compensation for the airlines was announced Friday, despite pleas by the industry for urgently needed help.
The carriers have taken the steps that they took today at the request of the government for reasons the government has outlined, and therefore those measures will be implemented. But we are still very much in need of sectoral support.
That's why the conversations with these airlines continue.
One final thing, the government gave early warning Friday that soon it's going to require all travelers arriving at the land border to have a clean COVID-19 test before crossing back into Canada. Robin?
David, the majority of cases are still connected to community spread. Is this an effective way to stop the spread of the virus?
Well, as a matter of fact, the most recent data collected by the Public Health Agency of Canada shows that just 1.4% of all the COVID-19 cases we've had in this country are as a result of international travel. Now, that said, it is quite clear that public health authorities right now are very concerned about these new variants of the virus that are out there. These new variants are more infectious and they may be a little more resistant to existing vaccines. And that's definitely a motivating factor for these new measures. Robin?
And they are worrisome. Thank you very much, David Akin in Ottawa. Ontario Premier Doug Ford announced his own mandatory testing plan for international arrivals at Canada's busiest airport. Starting Monday, anyone arriving at Pearson on an international flight will have to take a COVID-19 test, and those who refuse to take one will be fined $750. Ford says mandatory testing at land border crossings will also be implemented as soon as possible. The Premier says he can't count on the federal plan, so Ontario is forging ahead with its own.
It looks like these new measures won't be fully in place until a few weeks from now. That's a few weeks too long. That's why today our government is taking swift and decisive action. We're releasing a 6-point plan to stop the spread of COVID-19 variants.
And in Manitoba, new travel restrictions are now in place requiring anyone who enters the province to self-isolate for 14 days. The province is also strongly advising individuals to go for 2 COVID tests, one immediately upon arrival and one again at 7 days, regardless of symptoms. Manitobans are still allowed to leave, but the province's top doctor is recommending against any travel for non-essential reasons.
So we ask Manitobans to work together with us. Let's keep our numbers down. Let's keep the variant out. Follow the spirit of the orders. Don't look for ways to skirt the orders. We need to stay diligent if we want to continue our reopening plans.
Manitoba has not detected any variant cases, but says it is testing for them regularly. The province reported 152 new COVID-19 infections today and 3 deaths. In Alberta, health measures will be eased for restaurants, indoor fitness, and some children's activities effective February 8th. In-person dining will resume with a maximum of 6 people per table. Liquor service will end at 10 p.m. As for fitness, only one-on-one training will be permitted at indoor fitness facilities. It's part of a new provincial framework which will ease health measures based on the number of COVID-19 hospitalizations. For the second time in less than a month, Canada is dealing with a delay in the delivery of vaccines. No doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine arrived in the country this week. Pfizer is shipping roughly 80% fewer shots than it initially promised over the next month. Production had to stop at its manufacturing plant in Belgium to do upgrades. And today, the Prime Minister confirmed Moderna will only be shipping about 75% of its expected doses next week. There is some good news. Health Canada is reviewing the clinical trial data for the AstraZeneca shot, and a decision could be coming within days. And then there's Johnson & Johnson. The company says its vaccine is more than 60% effective and only requires 1 dose. The timing is key because of the shortage of vital vaccines. Here's Crystal Gumansing.
1 jab and done. Johnson & Johnson is the first to come to the table with positive clinical data for a COVID-19 vaccine that requires just a single dose.
It either stops you from getting COVID or it helps you, if you get COVID, have a much milder version of COVID.
Overall, the shot is said to be 66% effective. This preliminary data comes from a trial involving 44,000 people in the United States, Latin America, and South Africa.
As we're talking about supply chain issues and running out of vaccine and all this stuff, 66% after a single dose is still really, really, really good.
Other vaccines such as Pfizer-BioNTech and Moderna are said to be more than 90% effective. AstraZeneca comes in at around 62%. It, like Johnson & Johnson's shot, is DNA-based. It still targets the virus's spike protein, teaching the body to recognize it and produce antibodies. However, it uses a non-active flu-like virus as the delivery system. Johnson & Johnson says when it comes to severe illness and death, the shot performs even better.
We got 85% protection against severe disease, 100% protection for death, and 100% protection for hospitalization.
Protection is what everyone is looking for. This week, Novavax also added a piece to the protective puzzle, saying data from its Phase 3 UK trial found its 2-dose vaccine to be 89.3% effective, adding it does provide protection for both the UK and South African variants. The World Health Organization and many national regulators say a minimum efficacy rate of 50% is needed before vaccines should be considered for authorization.
Like all vaccines, we have to actually get that data reviewed. Many vaccines, we would love to have more of them, but we don't have them right now.
The drug companies will now turn their attention to seeking emergency use approval in different countries. Crystal Gavancing, Global News, London.
The Prime Minister also confirmed that provinces and territories will now receive the other $1 billion in back-to-school funding that was promised last summer.
This $1 billion investment will go towards everything from more sanitizer to better ventilation for classrooms to support for online learning and remote classes.
Last August, the federal government committed up to $2 billion for the Safe Return to Class Fund. The first installment was paid last fall when schools reopened across the country. As the pandemic drags on, more Canadians are struggling to pay the rent. Advocates say we've long had an affordable housing problem in this country. And as Farah Nasser explains, on top of this health emergency, there's an unprecedented eviction crisis as well.
It has been a devastating year for Zineth Jahan. Her husband passed away of cancer last January, and then came the pandemic.
I lost my husband, lost the major part of income, lost my job.
Suddenly, she says, she was struggling to pay the bills, and she now owes $8,000 in back rent. In May, she got an eviction notice from her landlord, Pinedale Properties.
I'm feeling the fear of homelessness.
Pinedale claims they've reached repayment agreements with the majority of tenants who are struggling, and they haven't evicted anyone during the pandemic. They also told Global News they offered Jahan a repayment plan, but she didn't respond. It would have required her to pay $900 a month for 10 months on top of her $1,500 rent, an amount she says she can't afford. So her eviction notice is still pending. Most provinces temporarily paused evictions during the first wave, but by the end of summer, those bans were lifted. And in Ontario, that led to a surge of online eviction hearings, 7,000 of them in November alone.
I observed tenants being evicted in as little as 60, 90 seconds.
Public health experts say the virus has exposed long-existing housing issues.
To say that we're going to have a whole new generation of people move into chronic homelessness, I mean, that's even more of a damning failure.
At the height of the first wave in May, a record 2.6 million Canadians were unemployed, or 13.7%. By July, the overall unemployment rate had dropped to 9.3%. But in racialized communities, it was nearly double that figure.
We are not all together in this crisis. Riches are becoming rich, poor are becoming more poor.
We've been told for months, stay home and stay safe. That's easy to say, but without more financial support for renters, it's much harder to do, especially for those facing eviction. Farah Nasser, Global News, Toronto.
Toronto's fire chief calls it an unspeakable tragedy. Early this morning, a fire ripped through a home, killing 4 people. Fire crews were called to the home early this morning. It took 3 hours before the flames were brought under control. 6 people were pulled from the residence. 2 were rushed to hospital. 1 remains in critical condition. The other person is stable.
These are hard days. They're hard days for our team. They're hard days for our city. This is one of the worst tragedies by fire I've seen in my career.
The flames jumped to 2 other homes, but no one in the neighboring houses was hurt. Several firefighters, however, were injured. At one point, there was a mayday call for a firefighter thought to be trapped, but he managed to get out. Investigators have not determined what caused the fire. Betting against the big boys. Coming up, the turmoil on Wall Street as small investors rally against major hedge funds. In the U.S., federal officials are reviewing Gamestop's unbelievable stock surge, 8,000% in the past 6 months. It all began when hedge funds started shorting stocks in the struggling video game retailer, betting its stock price would drop and they'd make money. But online investors began gobbling it up, making millions. Jennifer Johnson has the latest.
Wall Street's top cop, the Securities and Exchange Commission, is taking a hard look at what unfolded after Reddit's Wall Street Bets community outsmarted big-name hedge funds by driving up GameStop's stock. The hedge funds bet the struggling video game company's worth would continue to tank, but amateurs went online and drove it up.
It's not investing, and as long as they look at it as speculation, there's no problem at all. It's not dissimilar to buying a lottery ticket, in a sense. You have to be a little bit lucky.
But the luck ran out quickly after Robinhood, a popular app among armchair investors, pulled the plug and stopped more people from buying GameStop stock. The SEC is reviewing why.
It's infuriating. They're basically saying, we'll let the big boys keep playing, but the little guys have to sit this one out now.
Some believe Robinhood was trying to protect the hedge funds that were losing billions. Robinhood also restricted trading on BlackBerry and Bed Bath & Beyond. Many lawmakers were furious.
All of a sudden, the billionaires and some hedge funds are yelling because they're not the only ones who make money when the manipulation works.
The head of Robinhood denies any wrongdoing.
We absolutely did not do this at the direction of any market maker or hedge fund or anyone we route to or other market participants.
Some small investors made big bucks in the revolt, trying to get rich quick. Others say they just wanted to stick it to Wall Street elites.
This is a chance to get them. Buy. And they got enough people. We don't fully understand all the intentions right now.
Experts are warning this kind of buying is risky because any stock can drop dramatically in a matter of seconds. But some young investors didn't seem to care.
It's the regular Joes versus Wall Street. And that's what, when I put money into it, I said, even if this goes to zero and I lose everything, I like being a part of it.
Whether the stock surge will help GameStop survive this pandemic is unknown. But its three biggest individual shareholders are now billionaires. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
And a 10-year-old boy from Texas has cashed in from GameStop. 2 years ago, Jaden Carr's mother bought him 10 shares to teach her son about economics. She paid $60 US at the time. Well, this budding broker has learned a thing or two, and he sold his stock for $3,200 American. Still ahead, General Motors' electric shift and how it will drive Canada's auto industry. Automakers have long been told the only way to drive the industry forward is to reverse emissions and phase out fossil fuels for more environmentally sustainable options. General Motors is aiming to go all electric. The company will end the production of gas and diesel-powered cars and trucks by 2035 and turn completely carbon neutral by 2040. As Eric Sorensen reports, the shift is impacting Canada's auto manufacturing industry.
For more than 100 years, fossil fuels have been the lifeblood of the combustion engines built by General Motors. But in a world of undeniable climate change, pressure to choke off tailpipe emissions that cause greenhouse gases is turning GM green. Most of its cars will be electric vehicles by 2035. It comes on top of GM's plans to invest about $35 billion in electric and autonomous vehicles over the next 5 years. GM's CEO calls the historic moment an inflection point.
The moment when our world's reliance on gas and diesel-powered vehicles will begin transitioning to an all-electric future.
E-vehicles represent just 3% of the world's vehicle market, but GM's move could spur a chain reaction of industries to turn greener faster.
It's going to have all kinds of impacts along not just General Motors and its massive supply chain, but in terms of moving the whole goalposts towards a EV future and a carbon neutral future.
The old expression, what's good for GM is good for the country, may now be what's good for the planet.
Electric vehicles represent an important climate solution, but also an important economic solution. When you look at major auto manufacturers such as GM making commitments to have zero tailpipe emissions by 2035, that's significant.
In Canada, GM is undertaking $1 billion transformation of this Ontario plant, from producing the gas-drinking Equinox to new electric delivery vehicles for companies like FedEx.
That's where the industry is heading. That's where consumers are heading. They're not there today, but they will be.
And Canada also sees it as an incredible opportunity to create jobs.
But among the cascading effects of GM changing gears is potentially another blow to Canada's oil and gas economy.
Large fossil fuel producing provinces, the writing is on the wall, and they need to start thinking about how they're going to transition out of the oil economy.
GM plans to release 30 new e-vehicles by 2025, and that still leaves room to go big in car buying. An e-powered Humvee is coming out in the next year. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
The model turned role model for generations of black women. Up next, the remarkable life of Cicely Tyson.
He'll know when to call me. When they call me, I'll be ready.
Hollywood legend Cicely Tyson has died. Tyson got her start as a model. That helped launch a television, movie, and Broadway career spanning more than 6 decades. She became one of the first black actors in a recurring TV role in East Side, West Side.
What they doing, Mom?
Her role as the sharecropper's wife in Sounder earned her an Oscar nomination. She won 2 Emmys for the 1974 television drama, The Autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman. A new generation of moviegoers witnessed her talent in the hit The Help. In 2013, she won a Tony Award at the age of 88. Tyson helped shatter Hollywood stereotypes by insisting she play characters that allowed her to radiate dignity and strength. In 2016, she was given the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in the United States. And just this week, she released a memoir called Just As I Am. Tyson was 96. Across the country, Canadians are marking a somber anniversary. It has been 4 years since the deadly shooting at a mosque in Quebec City.
I remember the victim of Quebec City mosque shooting.
Most of today's memorials are taking place online, including the Green Square campaign. Supporters wear a green square representing the green carpets at the mosque as a display of unity. On this day in 2017, 6 men were killed when a gunman opened fire at the Quebec City Islamic Cultural Centre. It remains the worst mass murder in a house of worship in Canadian history. Tonight, we leave you with more of the touching tributes to the victims. Good night.